Our keynote speaker, Dr. Bettina Friese.
Friese.
Perfect.
That's Eric's fault. Has an impressive background in public health and sociology with specific expertise in underage risk behaviors, including underage drinking and drug use. She was the PI, Principal Investigator, on a grant from NIAAA, National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Addiction, NIAAA. The goal of this study, which you will hear about more here, was to gain an understanding of how youth access alcohol and how the sources of this alcohol relate to how and where teens consume it. This study also included interviews with the parents of these teens in order to further examine youth access to alcohol in the home and parents' knowledge and attitudes concerning social host ordinances. I should also share that some of this research is focused on youth access to prescription drugs in the home and the role of medical marijuana legalization on youth marijuana use. And if that's not enough, Dr. Friese is also part of a team that assists California communities in implementing SPIFF-SIG grants.
SPIFSIG.
These grants help implement programs, policies, and practices to reduce substance abuse and its related problems. Her research is so relevant to our work here in San Diego County. We're really, really glad to have her. So please join in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Bettina Friese.
Perfect. I don't need this. Thank you for inviting me. My last name is hard for anybody to pronounce. I'm originally from Germany. It's Friese. That's why it's hard for Americans to pronounce my last name. Thank you for the nice introduction, and I'm very happy to be here. You obviously do amazing work. I'll be talking about sources of alcohol for teens. I'll be talking about the social drinking contexts and drinking locations. I'll be talking about teens who host parties at home, why parents let teens drink, and what parents know about social host ordinances. All of the findings I'm discussing here today are from this one grant from NIAAA. And this was a 4-year study that was conducted in order to obtain in-depth qualitative descriptions of social and commercial pathways through which teens obtain alcohol and the social contexts within which they consume the alcohol. So first we conducted qualitative interviews, and then based on these findings, we designed survey items in order to integrate them into a larger California-wide telephone survey. And that was, the purpose of that was to obtain population data on sources of alcohol and drinking contexts.
We're going to actually, let's see. Hold it. We're going to have you hold it.
Hello.
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 There we go.
Okay. But I talk with my hands, so I might move it away. Let me know, remind me. Okay. So the qualitative research consisted of semi-structured interviews with teens ages to 15 through 18 living in Northern California. And we selected youth who had reported drinking alcohol on at least 4 occasions within the past 12 months. And we selected kids who had been drinking because we wanted to talk to them about where they got alcohol and when they drank it. And we also limited ourselves to people who lived within 150 miles of the Bay Area. And that was because these were face-to-face interviews. We sent interviewers out there, and we wanted to be able to do it in a day. So that's why we selected within 150 miles. We interviewed a total of 47 teens, slightly more males than females, because we found slightly more male drinkers. Overall, we had a response rate of 78%. And because we were already in the home, we decided it was a good idea to also talk to one of the parents. 44 parents agreed to be interviewed, and we selected the first parent who agreed. So often when we called to get consent for the teen interview, we then recruited the parents at the same time. All interviews lasted approximately 1 hour. So then what we did is, based on the findings from those in-depth qualitative interviews, we developed questionnaire items, which we then integrated into an ongoing telephone survey that was conducted already with teens in California, and we included our questions for this study in 2011, 2012. And these teens were sampled from 50 mid-sized cities. And that was done because most of the cities in the US are mid-sized cities, meaning between 50,000 to 500,000 people. Also, this was part of a larger study that wanted to look at things like nighttime crashes. So if you selected cities that were much smaller than that, you would not have enough occurrences for it to make sense. Also, some of the larger cities, for example, San Diego was not included, San Francisco was not included, neither was LA, because some of them are very heterogeneous populations and also have some unique landmarks that might change things, like port cities, for example. So in this survey, we integrated questions about sources of alcohol, drinking locations, social contexts, and we asked specifically about who had hosted a party at home. A lot of surveys have already asked about, have you attended a party, was there alcohol? But we wanted to know, who are these kids who can host parties at home? Overall, the sample was 65% non-Hispanic white, gender 46% female, and average age was 17 years of age. We conducted qualitative interviews with teens, and what we did is we wanted to know specifically in great detail where they got alcohol the last time they drank. And so we used a critical incident approach, and that's what it's called when you ask about the last instance. So we asked them, describe the last instance where you acquired and used alcohol, including where and with whom you consumed the alcohol. Then we asked them, is this typical? If not, then we asked them to describe a typical instance. What we found is that there is a blurring of lines between social and commercial sources. And we all know from surveys, a lot of kids get alcohol from social sources, from some commercial sources, but we found some adaptations of kids of ways to get alcohol from commercial sources. Overall, they thought it was very difficult to get alcohol directly from commercial sources, but they found a way around it. And here is a story, here's a quote from a teen. We call them country markets, the ones out in the middle of nowhere. I know people who have gone there so many times and tried to get alcohol. They're like, no, I can't do that. But if they go so much, they finally just let them. One guy I know, he's gone so much and he gets to know the person so that the guy will trust him, and then he just sells to him every weekend. Sometimes there will be a designated time because a certain person is working, or they'll be like, I can't today because the cops have been looking at me. So what teens have figured out is that they can develop relationships with clerks who then can be certain that this is not part of a sting operation and they will sell them alcohol. And this was actually not uncommon. And once a teen has developed that relationship, they sometimes bring their friends along who then develop the same relationship with the clerk. We also found that some stores may up prices for teens and then be willing to sell to teens. For example, one teen told us about stores that around Halloween have lines around the block with teens who can go in and they will pay maybe 30% extra for alcohol. But overall, getting alcohol from commercial sources directly is very difficult. And one reason was that kids are afraid of being embarrassed. So for example, one teen reported that he goes into stores to purchase alcohol if he has been told by a friend that this guy will sell alcohol to minors. Otherwise, it's just an embarrassment. And one teen reported that he has never tried to buy alcohol himself because if the clerk says no, he doesn't want to look stupid. So fear of embarrassment is a powerful factor not to go into commercial sources and try to get alcohol. We did find some shoulder taps, but shoulder taps are considered very risky because the person could just take your money and not give you any alcohol. They can turn you into the authorities, or it's also time consuming. For example, teens told us that it might take up to 2 hours to find somebody who is willing to buy them alcohol. And shoulder tap is really a last resort. And one teen told us that he uses shoulder taps because it's the only way he can really get alcohol, because I don't know anybody over 21 who will buy me beer. And some teens will do shoulder tapping inside the store. For example, this teen, I went into a grocery store, I just walked to an alcohol aisle, asked somebody, and I walked out. It was a very smooth operation. We usually do it outside, but then sometimes there's nobody outside, so we just go inside. They're already in the store. They're already buying alcohol. Who do they approach for shoulder taps? Homeless people, people hanging out in front of the store. It's easy to ask them to buy alcohol for them. Late night is a very good time. So if I did any shoulder tap operations, I would do them late at night because many people shopping at that time are already shopping for alcohol. And here's the profile of somebody to approach for shoulder taps. Avoid old people. I mean, just people that look like they wouldn't be down. If they have a walker, they wouldn't be down. If they have a little cane, I don't know. That's a definite turnoff. I don't know, white hair. Your senses sort of tell you, you know, it's sort of instinct. Well, somebody with a skateboard or somebody with a flannel shirt or somebody that just looks chill. So when you do shoulder tap operations, get those. They are the ones that will be approached for shoulder taps. We did find instances of theft from commercial sources. One teen told us we had a whole system, and it turns out the only aisle in every store that doesn't have a security camera is the pet food aisle. So my friend looks at it out, and I have the backpack, and he'd go and he'd grab the handle, and this is a handle, that picture, because it has a handle. It's a 1.75 liter bottle, and walk into the pet food aisle and put it in my backpack, and we'd walk out. There's another teen told us there's a grocery store right across from the school, and this friend of his was going and stealing alcohol, and he came out and then he would sell it to kids on campus. And the handle, by the way, the 1.75 liter, we asked teens, like, when you go to a party, how much do you bring? And they would bring, a lot of times, not always, a handle for about 4 people. That's the going rate of alcohol. That is a lot of alcohol to bring to a party. And by the way, they wouldn't bring it in like that. They'd fill it into a water bottle, and you would not be able to tell that it's alcohol. We also found, so there's this blurring of lines between commercial sources and social sources. And social sources have figured out that they can profit from buying alcohol for underage kids. So it's a lot of times it's older siblings who have just turned 21. And so one teen told us, and that we saw that over and over again in the interviews, from what I know, it's the kids that have older siblings. They generally have a lot easier time getting alcohol than the ones who don't. Another one told us, my friend's older brother and her are really close, and he's 21. So if I ever need a handle, I just go to her. She can get me a handle for $20 just cause her brother's okay with it. So I'll give her $20 and she'll give it to me like that day or the next day. But usually he charges like $30 for kids he doesn't know very well. So it's gotten to be quite a business. Parents don't often just provide alcohol to teens. When they provide it, it's in the context of family celebrations or holidays. But there are some instances where parents will provide alcohol to teens if they want to go to a party. We were going to a party and we were trying to find alcohol. My friend's dad said he would get it for us. We just basically ask sometimes and he says, yeah. He never brings back change, but it's never a lot of change that we'd have to actually worry about it. There's a few parents that do this. But this is really not the norm. What we find is vacations, holidays are much more common occasions when parents may be providing alcohol. So one teen told us, when we were on vacation, my dad was asking me if I wanted a beer. He's like, well, you're 16, do you want a beer? I was like, no, I don't like beer. My mom was like, she only drinks whiskey. And so my dad got out a bottle of whiskey and gave it to me. I didn't drink it all, but he gave it to me, and I was drinking that, and he kept handing it to me. I mean, he doesn't do that a lot. It's every once in a while. Over the summer when we're on vacation, he'll do it, but he definitely will not give me booze or buy me alcohol on other occasions. We also looked at social drinking contexts. So when you have this alcohol, who do you drink it with? And there were 3 basic social contexts that we came across. And let me just say, kids said, no, you don't drink alone. And they were very aware that that might be a sign that something is wrong, that it was problematic drinking. So what they do is they describe these following 3 contexts. Hanging out, that's socializing with 1 to 3 other people, low key, very quiet. Then there are kickbacks. Some of them call them kick-its. It's a slightly larger group of people, maybe up to 12 individuals. It's attended by close friends. You typically know everybody there. Music and noise was kept to a minimum to avoid drawing the attention of neighbors or law enforcement. And then there are parties. Those are large events with loud music, frequently guests who were not known to the host in attendance. So kids are definitely aware that parties can get broken up, or that they can draw the attention of law enforcement. So here's a quote: "Well, I think there's more hanging out, like little kickbacks, than there are parties. Parties get shut down really quick. The cops always come to them because of the music and the noise. There's too many kids. If you have your friends hanging out, just a few people in your backyard, you're okay. You're not playing loud music or anything." Another kid said, "The big parties get broken up pretty quickly. Kids will come at around 9 and just try to party as hard as they can for 2 hours at the most, and then the cops will show up and everyone leaves." In our telephone survey, so now we knew about these drinking contexts, and in the survey we had trouble distinguishing between the hanging out and the kickbacks. They seem to be both these smaller groups. So we asked about kickbacks. So what describes the occasion, the last time you drank alcohol? This is just the last time. So we asked about kickbacks, parties, family celebrations, and all the other things that emerged from these qualitative interviews. And we found that most of the drinking occasions are really kickbacks. So the last time they drank, 54%, it was in this context of a kickback, that smaller group. Parties were 26%, followed by family celebrations, almost 13%, and then all these other drinking contexts, family vacation dates, sports event, prom, really don't amount to a whole lot. But so the majority of drinking occasions are these kickbacks. We also asked about drinking locations, and most of these drinking locations are private homes. I believe it's 80% total, 83% or 86% total that are private homes. These kids, I mean, you see outdoors, not even 6%, other 5%, restaurant, school, bar, nightclub, abandoned house. That came out in our qualitative interviews because the economy had just tanked and they had figured out they can break into some of those abandoned houses, but it did not pan out in the telephone survey. So these drinking takes place in private residences owned by parents. Another thing we asked about is, on that last drinking occasion, did any of these things happen? And we asked about risky behaviors and negative consequences. And keep in mind, this is just one drinking occasion. So the last time they drank, what happened? 17% used illegal drugs, and we did not ask a follow-up question, but I would bet that's marijuana. 15% experienced a hangover. Almost 12% engaged in sexual activity. 9% rode with a driver who had been drinking. 8% later regretted something they did. 8% threw up. Almost 5% shouted, insulted, cursed, or threatened someone. Almost 5% drove a car after drinking. Almost 4% got hurt or injured. Overall, 43% of kids who reported on their last drinking occasion had at least one of these. And on average, they experienced 2. So we wanted to examine the relationship between the drinking context, the drinking location, and negative consequences and risky behaviors. For example, are these kickbacks safer? Do kids drink less at these kickbacks than at big parties? So overall, we had, out of these 1,121 teens who completed the survey, 501 reported on their last drinking occasion. And of those, 42% reported that they felt drunk. So almost half who said, at my last drinking occasion, I felt drunk. We found that drinking at a family celebration was related to fewer drinks and fewer negative consequences or risky behaviors. And that's not surprising. Teens drink differently in front of their parents than they drink with their friends. We compared small group drinking versus party drinking, and we found teens drinking in small groups versus drinking at large parties did not differ in the number of drinks they consumed or the negative consequences, risky behaviors they experienced. So any parent thinking like, oh, if I just let them have a few friends over than a big party, as long as there's drinking going on, it's probably going to be the same in terms of the number of drinks and what happens there. We found no significant differences between negative consequences or risky behaviors and drinking locations. For example, own home versus somebody else's home. Parents sometimes think that if they let their teens drink in their own home, it's safer. But this suggests that they will engage in the same risk behaviors. And actually, as I recall, we found more sexual activity happening when drinking was going on in their own home, which I'm assuming is because they feel more comfortable there. Other drinking locations, like that smorgasbord we had of restaurants, bars, nightclubs, school, abandoned homes, were linked to significantly higher alcohol consumption than drinking at their own home. However, because these are so vastly different, it's really difficult to draw any conclusions from them. Then we asked specifically about teen parties, meaning teens who host parties at home. We found that 24% of teens had a party at their home in the past year. Of those teens, 39% reported that there was alcohol at their party. And not surprisingly, the percentage of parties with alcohol goes up as the age of the teen goes up. So 16% of parties hosted by 15-year-olds had alcohol, 22% for 16-year-olds, 38% for 17-year-olds, 61% for 18-year-olds, and at 19 years of age, if the host is 19, it's 82% of those parties have alcohol at them. Most parties are supplied with alcohol by multiple sources. Only 23% of teens hosted a party with alcohol from just one source. Half had reported 2 sources, 26% reported 3 or more sources. And of those who reported having alcohol at their last party, 38% provided alcohol themselves, and these add up to more than 100% because they are usually multiple sources. 84% replied that guests brought the alcohol with them, and we find that to be very common. It's actually an expectation. When teens go to a party, they're expected to bring their own alcohol in most cases, unless they're very good friends with the host. But alcohol is difficult to come by, so guests have to bring their own. 74% reported that someone else provided it, and we're not quite sure who that would be. It could be, somebody they did not consider a friend. We had some other questions about it, but we're not quite sure how to interpret that. And 9% replied that their parents provided alcohol. But we had also in the qualitative interviews, we got some responses that teens said they have heard of parents supplying alcohol, but the teens have to pay for it themselves. So that's apparently where those parents drew the line. The thing that surprised us about these teen parties is that when there is a teen party with alcohol, parents are often at home and they know about it. This is not like what you see in the movies. The parents are out, there's a crazy party taking place, now this happens. But in a lot of these cases, the parents actually know about it. So 72% of teens who had a party reported that at least one of their parents knew about the party. 64% of teens reported that at least one parent was at home at the time, and 70% of teens who had alcohol at their party indicated that at least one of their parents definitely knew that there was alcohol at the party. 24% said that at least one parent probably knew about the alcohol, and only 5% said that their parents did not know. So when there is a party with alcohol, chances are parents are at home, they know about it, and they know about the alcohol. So we did some regression analysis. We wanted to know what's related to hosting a party. We did not find any differences by gender, meaning it didn't matter whether the host was male or female, how old they were, their race, their parents' education, or whether the community had a social host ordinance. What we did find, and these are just parties, not whether alcohol is there or not. So what we did find is it does matter whether the parents themselves host parties in their home, and I'll get into this more in a second. We looked at who hosts parties with alcohol. Again, no differences by gender, race, parents' education, whether the community has a social host ordinance or whether parents were at home. We did find a significant difference for age, number of guests at the party, and a negative relationship for parents knowing about the party. And here's what this means. So teens with parents who host parties at home are themselves more likely to host parties at home. What does this mean? This means that maybe it's social parents have social kids, or parents who themselves like to host parties are more relaxed about their children hosting parties at home. Of course, we have parties here all the time. Why don't you have your friends over? So those are two possible explanations. The greater the number of guests at the party, the greater the likelihood of there being alcohol. And of course, we know that over 80% of the guests of the parties had guests bringing alcohol. So that's a gimme. It's also very hard to control when kids bring in alcohol in clear water bottles. Parents knowing about the party was related to a lower likelihood that there was alcohol at the party. However, parents at home, being at home at the time of the party was not related to a lower likelihood of there being alcohol at the party. So suggesting parents' presence really does not make a difference. The likelihood of hosting a party at home or having alcohol at a party was no different for teens living in a city with a social host ordinance than it was for teens living in a city without a social host ordinance. And I would suspect that has something to do with parents not knowing about social host ordinances, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So why do parents let their teens drink and under what circumstances? So these are the qualitative interviews, the in-depth interviews we conducted with parents. And we asked parents, some parents think it's a good idea to let kids drink at home. What are your thoughts on that? And of course, the first thing we heard is, what do you think? It's a horrible idea. They were like, oh no, this is just, you should not allow your kids to drink. And it's a strong social desirability response. So when you do any surveys with parents, be aware of that. It really depends on how you ask the questions. They don't think it's a good idea to let their kids drink at home. They think underage drinking is horrible. But then we asked the follow-up questions. Some parents who do not normally allow their teenagers to drink at home, let them drink on special occasions. Think of an occasion when you allowed your teen to drink, and that's when the stories come out. So be very aware when you ask parents in surveys, because there is that biased response. So we found a lot of inconsistencies, and remember, these are the qualitative interviews. There are a lot of inconsistencies over time. Parents might allow teens drinking on one holiday but not the next one. There are no consistencies between parents. One parent may say, yeah, it's okay. The other one say, absolutely not. So kids get a lot of contradictory information from their parents. One parent said, no, we don't have any explicit rules. We have limits and general concepts, but we haven't said this is exactly the situation. One parent said, I have let them drink at home a little bit here, a little bit there. I guess once here and once we were in Vegas. But do I approve of it? No, I don't approve of it, but I've let it happen. So there are no specific rules. Family celebrations, holidays, and vacations are common situations where parents allow their teens to drink. For example, I believe this was a father who said, yeah, I think at their cousin's wedding. So there's that. I don't think too much at holidays, but I think, the weddings, because there's so much booze flowing. And if it comes their way, I'm not surprised. So, and then we're driving them home. What could be a better situation? Another father said, he talked about his son drinking, and he said he was 15 or 16. We weren't keeping a tab on him. We were spending the night, so it was no big deal, and he was definitely drinking. He was drunk, and I pulled him aside and I said, just don't embarrass the family. I want you to maintain. And he didn't do anything really stupid. He wasn't barfing in the bushes or anything, so I guess it was okay. And what you see is in both of these is the awareness of the drunk driving. So as long as we avoid drunk driving, it's all good. Holidays, common drinking occasion. Last New Year's Eve, we had a big party here at the house, and we let the kids have a flute or two of champagne. Even some of the older kids that were here with their parents, New Year's Eve, we'll let them have some, and Christmas Eve, we usually let them. Family vacations, common drinking occasion. Yeah, I would say my daughter tried almost every wine. I wouldn't say we encouraged it, but it was really fun to enjoy the culture. Maybe let her see a little bit what Spanish wine is like versus others. So yeah, I think we were a little more free when we were on vacation, definitely. So why do parents let their teens drink? We found 3 big categories. One was intentional, teaching drinking practices, demystifying alcohol, and preserving tradition. Other situations were more spontaneous. There was pressure from others to let the teen drink. And there was a desire for harm reduction. The thinking is, they're going to drink anyway. If I'm too strict, they won't tell me what's going on with them. So it's the desire to keep big lines of communication open, and a fear of drunk driving. A lot of this is driven by a fear of drunk driving, which is, of course, a good thing, but also, in a way, it's opened the door to this kind of drinking. So teaching drinking practices. One parent said, I figured I'd rather have them learn how to drink properly at home with us than learn with a bunch of teenagers who just guzzle beer and throw up. So that was my reason. And I figured it's just sort of a family thing, and it just seems like a pretty harmless thing. Another parent told us, the kids who grow up in a house where they get a sip of wine or watered down glass of wine with dinner, it actually seems to help prevent alcohol abuse. Let me just say that is a big myth that we came across over and over again with parents, that there are fewer problems with alcohol in Europe than in the US. So this is a survey of teens that was conducted across Europe, and this is the data are slightly older, they're from 2007. And this is the prevalence of intoxication amongst teens during the past 12 months. The US is at the very end there, and it's hard to see, I'm sorry, it's around like 33%. And there are some countries that have lower prevalences of intoxication, like Armenia, Cyprus, Greece, and Italy. Italy, it definitely sticks out there. And also Portugal and Romania, yes, and Poland. However, the rest of Europe is really experiencing higher rates of underage drinking and intoxication. So that is a myth that is out there, and it's so widespread. I think a week and a half ago, I heard somebody on CNN make that reference. Oh, there is less drinking, teen drinking going on in Europe. That is simply not true, and it's something that we have to combat. So parents also want to demystify alcohol, and that's their logic is, if you allow your children to drink and taste wine, they're not going to tend to overuse it or abuse it. You teach them that it's something of value. Wine is not something that's just forbidden fruit, but rather something that is going to be enjoyed and to be used in a way to make your meal more enjoyable. And let me just say, teens at parties do not drink wine. It has nothing to do with wine appreciation, and some parents were very interested in teaching wine appreciation, but when teens drink at parties, a lot of times it's vodka, and we found flavored vodkas to be particularly popular. We found amongst parents of European or Latin American backgrounds a sentiment like a desire to drink, teaching teens to drink to preserve tradition. For example, one parent said, no, one back. Yes. I come from a European background where if you drink, it's not that big a deal. My mother's English. We always tried to not promote drinking. But when I lived in England for a while, I'd go to the pubs with my uncles and have those shandies, lemonade and beer. And so we do the same with our kids. Some of the instances where parents let their teens drink were spontaneous. They hadn't planned on letting them drink, but it was oftentimes pressure from others. One mother described how she let her daughter play beer pong while on vacation, and when asked why, she said, well, because I was outnumbered. My husband thought it was okay, and my daughter really wanted to do it. Another mother who had really tried to raise her son, without any underage drinking and had very strict rules overall, described a situation. We were at a holiday celebration once, and the other parents determined that it was okay for their kids to drink because they would prefer their kids drink in their presence rather than secretly. And I watched my son drink more at that time than ever before, and I felt really uncomfortable. I wish the other parents hadn't said that was okay, but I felt that was because there were other teenagers there and I couldn't say, and other parents who I respected. But what they did is they sort of announced it at the table, and I felt like I couldn't notch it back in that situation. And there were a number of instances like that. It could be grandparents who said, let him have a beer, or situations where there is a sibling who is 21 and can drink, or a cousin who is slightly older, and the parents let that cousin drink. Then parents feel like they don't want to single out their child or make them look forbid this in the presence of others. Harm reduction. That was a big thing with parents. There is a great sense of fatalism. One parent said, if you say don't drink until you're 21, you're so rigid about it, they're just not going to talk to you. So you have to kind of raise them with wisdom, like, if you ever get into a situation, call me, because I'd rather have a drunk kid alive than a dead kid. So parents are very concerned that if they're too strict, if they say you can absolutely not drink, their children will not call them if they get drunk and really need a ride. One mother said, these kids are going to be 18 years old. You got to let them make their own mistakes, and I'd rather they make their mistakes when they're at home than when they're away. But I have to give her the rope until she hangs herself, and in 18 years, she's only hung herself twice. I think that's pretty good. And parents view underage drinking as unavoidable. It's going to happen. Kids will be kids, and we can tell them don't do this, but they're still going to do it. And one parent said, I think underage drinking is just a horrible thing, but kids are going to experience it. How am I doing on time? Okay. We did talk to parents about social host ordinances. Remember, these are the qualitative interviews with 44 parents. We asked, are you familiar with the term social host law? Does your community have a social host law? We talked to them about their perceptions of it and perceptions of police enforcement of these policies. Most parents did not know what a social host ordinance is. The interviewer had to explain it to them. Parents believe that it's not community-based. They believe it's statewide or possibly nationwide. They learned about social host ordinances, or something along those lines, what they think a social host ordinance is, from the media, like when we said, where have you heard anything about it? From the media. And we also found letters sent home from school were actually quite effective to let parents know about this. One parent said, my son and I every year through the high school sign that contract. They have a contract that you sign in your back to school packet now that you won't host children in your house with alcohol. Another father whose children are in private school said, well, your kids will get kicked out of school. Yeah, if they found out that you're supplying, that you gave them alcohol, your kids get kicked out of Catholic school. They get kicked out of school before law enforcement would really get involved. And that may be the case in private school. Public schools can obviously not do that. But it was, I believe, an effective way of educating parents about social host ordinances. We talked to parents about their perceptions of the ordinances. And, well, let me read the quote. I don't really know if there's an actual law, but we just felt that there should be one, or that there's a liability. For the most part, parents think of social host ordinance as the civil liability. If something happens to a kid leaving your house after drinking, you can lose the house. That was the primary thinking. There was no mention ever of getting a citation or, hey, we could get a ticket for this. Never. It's interesting for me. It may be even more of an issue of morality than it is an issue of legality. I would not be able to live comfortably with myself if I knew that someone drank alcohol here and then went ahead and got themselves killed in a car accident. Again, no concern about getting cited. It's the worst case scenario. However, we had some parents who did not think that they should be liable if they do not know about teens drinking in their home. One parent said, if our kids are having a party here and we're not around, we're gone for the weekend, and I'd find it difficult to feel that I was liable in some way for that. Or another father said, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm fast asleep in my room. The cops come. I don't know anything what was going on. I got 3 kids drinking quietly in this room. I'm asleep. I didn't know what was going on. Is that my fault? So some parents believe that they should not be responsible if they do not know about it. So for example, if they leave for the weekend and their kids have a big party, they think they shouldn't be responsible. And the social host ordinances or civil liability may have changed the behavior. For example, one father said, 20 years ago, I would have said to my son, call your friends up and say, hey, I'm going to let the guys have some beers. It's kind of like a pre-bachelor party when they graduate or something. But now I would not be that stupid. I have too much to lose. Another father said, I say to my son, oh no, this was a mother. I say to my son, it's illegal. Because right now at this age, he doesn't really care. But I can say to him, we can lose our house. We can be arrested. These are things that can happen to us if we make alcohol available to other people. Again, there is that fear of the civil liability. We can lose the house if something happens, but no concern about getting a ticket. We did ask about enforcement. Have you heard of this being enforced? And again, this is not San Diego. This is Northern California. And there was a thinking that the police have enough going on. I think there are a lot of other things going on in the city and a lot more violence and crime. Another parent said, I know that when we have kids, this is actually one of my favorite quotes out of the entire study, I know that when we have kids here drinking, I mean, yeah, it's a little bit of a risk. That's why we don't do it very often. And trying to keep it to, just people we know. I know it's wrong. It's wrong. I also know talking on my cell phone in the car is wrong, but I still do it. So I think that's just great. And this hosting kids at home whose parents they know. One thing that came out of the interviews is that parents absolutely want to be in control of anything alcohol related to their children. So it's their decision when they provide alcohol during a holiday celebration. It made them very angry to think that another parent might take that decision away from them at a party. And I don't know exactly how, but I would use that in a social marketing campaign because parents had very strong feelings about that. It is my decision whether my kid drinks. So parents would get very angry if they knew there's another parent out there somewhere handing out beers to their teen. Some parents had first-hand experience with enforcement. Here's a mother describing what happened when they tried to let their teen have a party in the home. We expected 20 to maybe 50 people, and I swear if there weren't 200 kids here. It was totally out of control. I ended up calling the cops after a while myself because I was like, this is crazy. These are kids that I don't know. The whole area was filled. Nobody could sleep. They were screaming and yelling. They wouldn't stay inside. Here I bought them sodas, I bought them juices, and I bought them water. Everything. I said no alcoholic beverages. It was like talking to the wall. And that is not an uncommon experience. These parties get out of control fairly quickly with teens texting, email, Facebook. Word about a party spreads very easily, and we found that some of these parties get very big very quickly. Here's the story of a mother. They had gone away for the weekend. So the neighbors called the police, and the mother said, if I had been home, I don't know what they would have done to my husband and I. All these kids were here drinking, smoking. I'm kind of glad I wasn't here. We didn't give our daughter the okay to do this. She just was going to have a few friends over. We left on Thursday, and by Thursday afternoon, Thursday night, Friday morning, she was freaking out because with text messages, emails, all this stuff, kids were just getting the message that there was a big party at this girl's house. So, in conclusion, am I still doing okay on time?
Yeah, and then we're going to take some questions.
Okay. Teens rely heavily on social sources for alcohol. Direct access to alcohol through commercial sources is relatively difficult, but teens have found ways to make the commercial sources a little bit social and the social sources a little bit commercial. So they have adapted their approach, possibly in response to enforcement activities. And it would also be my guess that, for example, if you would ease up on certain enforcement activities, word would spread like wildfire if teens would figure out that they can go back to commercial sources, which I think would be their preferred way of doing it, because it's the cheapest for them if they could just walk into a store. So definitely enforcement level has to be kept up. The private homes are the primary drinking location. Social host ordinances primarily target large parties. They will not address drinking in small groups. So we need new strategies that target social sources. Remember the older siblings who are making a little bit of profit on the side, older friends, and drinking at home. 24% of teens reported hosting parties at home. Many parents know about the party and alcohol being at the party. Alcohol at parties typically comes from multiple sources, making it so difficult even for well-meaning parents to control parties and keep them alcohol-free. We found no relationship in this study between social host ordinances and the likelihood that teens would host a party at home either with or without alcohol, and parents may be unaware of social host ordinances and the possible legal consequences of allowing minors to drink in their home, which is why I think it's very important to create visibility around the existing enforcement activities. You know, teens will tell other teens if they find a store where they can buy alcohol. I bet you a parent who gets a ticket for hosting a party at home is not telling anybody. So we have to find other ways. That's not how the news is going to spread. We have to find other ways of letting people know that they will get cited. So prevention efforts should also take into effect the different motivations of parents. Like, we need to dispel the myths about teen drinking in Europe. We need to address the myths that parents may believe about the safety of drinking in their own home. We need to equip parents with skills on how to deal with situations that may arise, situations where they may feel pressured to let their teen drink. We need to teach communication strategies that can be used with teens without alienating them. We should teach parents how to set rules and how to communicate them to children, and we need to engage parents in preventing drinking in the home. Parents do not know much about social host ordinances, are not particularly concerned about its enforcement. Schools, in addition to the media, may be important ways to disseminate information about social host ordinances, and we need to increase knowledge about social host ordinances, increase visibility around existing enforcement efforts. And most of the findings I discussed today are actually publicly available on pubmed.gov in these papers. And if you have any questions, well, I'm sure my email address is somewhere.